So, welcome back to Sound Bites, the show about good people doing good things in the food and drink industry. And one of those people is Véronique Rivest. Vero, as she's better known by friends and colleagues, is a kind of a legend in the Canadian wine industry. She's representing Canada on the world stage, competing for the title of Best Sommelier of the World, and even in 2013, achieved second at that incredibly difficult competition. She's been the Best Sommelier of the Americas, and even back in 2012, she won the title of Best Sommelier of Canada right here in Halifax. So she's currently the owner of Swap Wine Bar in Gatineau, Quebec, and she's the sommelier for Air Canada. And like I said, she'll be coming to Nova Scotia next month to host and to judge and be the technical lead for our next Best Sommelier of Canada competition. So welcome, Vero.
Hi, thank you.
So for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a sommelier and really what inspired you to achieve the heights that you really have achieved.
It makes me laugh because I'm thinking, how many hours do we have?
Well, okay, the condensed version of the story.
It's a bit of it's a real story of passion, I guess I say, in a way, even if we kind of tend to overuse that word. I never knew what I wanted to do growing up. I love studying. And I've always loved eating and drinking. I come from a family where my mom was German, my dad French Canadian. We always traveled a lot being kids. And so discovering other cultures and so food and wine was kind of following in those footsteps, right? Of traveling and discovering the world and different cultures. And, but I started working in restaurants at the age of 16, my first restaurant job as a student job. And I totally fell in love with the industry. Just the buzz of a restaurant, being around people and people having fun and just spending good times together around the table. And I've worked in restaurants ever since. But I couldn't at 18 or 19 tell my parents, I want to become a waitress. They had loftier goals for me. So I stayed in school and my studies have always been very general because I didn't know that I had too many center of interest and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So just naturally at one point I realized, my student job is what I prefer more than anything else. And the fact that it allows me to be a lifelong student, and it really embraces my generalist side also, because when you study wine, of course, you're wine tasting and wine regions and wine countries and grape varieties, but you're doing history and geography and chemistry and agronomy and marketing and economics, right? You're touching on so many subjects and it's constantly changing. So that's a bit, right, the kind of the reason that draw me to this.
Amazing.
Sorry.
Yeah, and for those listening, I think that's what you alluded to, not only from the interest side, and it's probably why most sommeliers become sommeliers. I don't think any of us, or few of us, said as we were entering university, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do." And certainly, I'm probably told my parents, like your parents, when I did my math and economics back degrees, they didn't think wine was going to be my choice. But what's interesting about what you say too is that it is a very broad range of knowledge you have to understand. And I think that when we get into talking about competition and things like that, I don't think people quite understand all that goes into being a top som. So what are, so when you, as a competitor in which you graduated to become, a legend, our best really, a legend. Tell us a little bit about what, it takes to be a som champion. Like what's in your DNA to be that? Because there's a difference between being a good som and to be a best som of Canada or one of the best in the world. You must need a lot of skill sets, let's say.
Curiosity is definitely a huge help, right? And I always say my two best qualities or faults, depends how you look at them, are curiosity and gourmandise, this love of eating and drinking. You have to be curious because, as I alluded to, the amount of knowledge is constantly, growing and it's changing. So people tend to think of sommelier competitions and all they see is the tasting part, right? For a lot of people, it's, oh, we're just guessing what's in the glass. And that always annoys me a little bit because, right, it's so much more than that. Obviously, tasting is a skill you have to develop, right? And it's not just tasting wine, it's tasting all alcoholic beverages, right? We need to be as knowledgeable about sake and beer and scotch as we are about wine. And the tasting part is not just a guessing game. It's not just guessing what it is. There's usually way more points given to your whole analysis. So what we call, technical analysis, a technical tasting, where you really take the wine apart in terms of its color, its aromatics, its structure, what's the acidity like, what's the alcohol like. You should be able to evaluate the alcohol level if the wine has been aged in, stainless steel or oak. If it's oak, is it new oak, old oak, right? So just that, it's already much bigger than people think. Usually competitions are threefold. There's the tasting, there's service, because we are first and foremost servers. There's a lot of light that has been shown, is that on our profession in the last few years, and that's great. But it's also, created a bit of a buzz where, everybody now takes a wine course and they call themselves a sommelier. If you don't work in a restaurant, you're not a sommelier. Okay? Or it's really service is an integral part of what we do. And so in competing, there's always a lot of service tasks. And it can be anything from, opening a bottle of champagne and serving it to 20 people and there's only one bottle, or decanting an old bottle. How do you deal with that? What happens if the cork breaks? What happens if you have, it's diplomacy and psychology, right? How to deal. We don't choose our guests and we have all kinds of guests. So all of that service aspect. And then to me, which is the most important, because it's kind of the base for everything else. You can be a great taster. You can be a great server, have great people skills. But if you don't have the knowledge to back it all up, at one point it's going to show, right? And you're not going to be to be among the top, you have to have extremely vast, detailed knowledge about everything wine, all the wines being produced in all the world, all the countries, all the regions, all the grape varieties, how you make wine, how you grow wine. So notions of viticulture, of geology, agronomy, of chemistry. Winemaking is pure chemistry. And then every single, grape varieties, there's over 10,000 grape varieties in the world. Yes. Nobody knows them all. All the regulations, if it says Chianti on a bottle, or if it says Tidal Bay, or if it says whatever, Burgundy, there's rules that come with that that apply to the regulations of that area. And so it's I could go on for a long time.
There you go. So all you Harvard Law School graduates, you think that was easy. Come to our world and see how you do.
Seriously, Mark, when I did the world competition 3 times, I often say that the period of time I spent, to me, it was like, at least doing a PhD, if not 2.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of, even I teach at a much lower level than the very best, and I know I've had people go through their master's degrees, and even at at the basic somm level. I mean, most say this is equivalent to a 4th year university course or a master's level program, just by the volume of information. So going back to the competition, we talk about the deep knowledge you need. The blind tasting being a second a component, but not necessarily the focal component that maybe got played out in movies like Somm. How much is confidence and personality? Because when we think about, I've talked to a lot of people that compete, and a lot of it treat it like almost like Olympics, in the sense that you're going into high level sporting competition. You not only need to have the fundamentals and the years of training, but you also need to be able to kind of distill that down and take a moment when you're competing and then be able to do that at the key moment. So how much does that play into a factor?
Depending on people, but I used to say that, managing your stress is about half of the competition, right? But any kind of competition or performance can be stress-inducing, right? Can be musicians going on stage, just like people competing, either sports or kind of competition. So it's not given to everybody. I know some of the best somms in the country do not compete because you put them on the stage and they freak out. right? And it's funny because we all work in a restaurant, so it's kind of our home base, right? When I was training for the world competition, I would go to colleagues' restaurants where I had never set foot before, and they would put me on the floor. They'd give me a menu, and they say, "You are in charge of these 3 tables. Go." Right? Because we can be a great sommelier, but you have your habits in your restaurant. It's kind of your house, right? You're comfortable there. You know where things are. You know the people. But being taken out of there, put on a stage in front of a public, it's not given to everybody to do that. And I know for me, managing my stress was huge. When I achieved second place at the world competition was, I gave myself the means to, you learn what works for you, what doesn't. And for the first time, I worked with a sports psychologist, somebody who coaches high-level athletes. And I'm sure it had a huge influence. And you know what else had a huge influence? When I did my first world competition in 2007, there was no social media. In 2013, there was way more. And I really felt a support. I felt like I had a whole country behind me, and that was huge. But everybody deals with it in different ways. I need to have fun. I love this job because I have fun doing it. And if there's no fun in it, I'm going to stop. It has to be pleasant. And it's the same thing in competing. I have one of the things I prefer the most of being a sommelier is the people, the customers we serve, the winemakers we meet, the sommeliers, the network of sommeliers we get to develop. And competing, probably the best thing to come out of it for me has been developing this amazing network of sommeliers all over the world, right? So that, to me, a competition is also a great way to meet like-minded professionals, to develop networks that are always hugely helpful, right? Yeah. So,
and I would say it's amazing, having just been the privilege to be on the slightly on the outside or on the more organizational side of these things, witnessing that many of the best also seem to be many of them humblest, that indeed, when you talk about developing friendships and looking at the best soms of the world, often many of the people, especially the modern age, I find are really good people. So you're coming back to Halifax as the technical lead this time. Does it mean something, because you did win your Canadian title here to be doing this in Halifax?
Of course, there's always, I actually went not too long ago, a few weeks ago for a short holiday, and just walking along the harbor front in Halifax brought back so many memories. I used to go running there because a good exercise regimen is also part of your preparation, right? To be, in French, we say un esprit sain dans un corps sain, a healthy mind and a healthy body, right? So working out is also a good thing. But yeah, so I was there a few weeks ago, and walking by the harbor was just, brought back a whole bunch of great memories. Those cities always kind of stick with you, right? I was lucky enough to do the second place at the world competition in Tokyo, which was also amazing memories.
Amazing. And as
Halifax is a wine place too. Sorry, but right.
Yeah, of course.
Nova Scotia, just to keep up with the wines, because like Quebec, your wine industry is rather small. So I mean, if you want to get the full picture, there's nothing like going there, right? Because we don't see everything in other provinces. So just to keep up with that, because it's a small but mighty industry, right? There's not tons of wineries, but the things that are done in Nova Scotia are really, really cool.
And you almost took my next question. So my question was, is there certain styles of wine or producers you're really excited to get back and taste when you're here in Nova Scotia? Because I mean, like you said, we're small, but there's kind of cool stuff happening.
Yeah, there is. Always it's fun to just, I don't have any preferences. I like to taste through everything I can get my hands on, and it's still manageable in Nova Scotia. I think you're still at around 20 wineries, if I'm not mistaken. But I thought I had seen one or two new ones that I didn't know of. But yeah, trying everything. What I really like is when, no matter where it is, but any wine region embraces who they are, right? A young wine region usually starts by emulating better known well-established classic wine regions, but it's the worst thing to do, right? You cannot make
Nova Scotia was guilty of it too in the late 90s, thinking we would have 55% or something red wine production in a climate that was completely unconducive to it.
Hey, Quebec 20 years ago was trying to make, big oaky reds. So,
Yeah.
But when you fully embrace who you are, where you are, your terroir, your climate, local grape varieties that are adapted to the place, it makes all the difference. That's what I love. That's what really turns me on, is when you taste the wine and you just go, huh, right? There's a singularity to it that makes you stop and think and wonder, what it is, where it's from, and why does it taste like this? There's wines that you just drink without thinking because they don't bring up any thoughts. I just say, but so, and I think Nova Scotia has really well managed to do that, right? With a focus on whites, with the Tidal Bay appellation, a lot of focus on sparkling. And not only does it match perfectly the terroir and the conditions that you have in Nova Scotia, but it's amazing with the local food, right? Talk about regional wine and food matching. Nova Scotia's got it.
We certainly do. So with that, I would say thanks, Vero, for coming on. We look forward to seeing you in less than a month here in Halifax. And those watching can hit www.sommu.ca and you can check out some of the events. There are a few things that are open to the public, but there is also a great gala, so we can celebrate the next Best Sommelier of Canada. And in terms of, I know you can't pick a person to be that you think, but what do you want that person to emulate, whoever it is?
All the best qualities in the sommelier: humility, curiosity, generosity, and a true love of people, wine, and food.
Amazing. So thank you, Vero.
Thank you, Mark.